We're here checking out the Dreamscape. This is the Dreamscape in a 147. This is a entry-level board. It's made for those people who are learning to turn, who want something a little forgiving and catch-free, but also something that can ride all mountain and be a little stable. So what it is a flat to rocker profile. So it's flat right here in between the bindings, and it goes to a rocker on the nose and the tail. There's 20 mil of setback on the board. So you get a little bit of directional ride. It's also a directional twin. You know, that'll help with powder days or just kind of giving it that more all mountain feel. So the Dreamscape comes in 3 sizes. You get a 142, a 147, and a 152. But for my specs, I felt pretty good on the 147. I feel like this was a good all-mountain size for me. It felt stable enough to ride all over the mountain, and it didn't feel super squirrely. So I feel like the 147 was a good fit for my specs. The Dreamscape comes with an extruded base, so it's good for the entry-level rider who doesn't want to worry about taking care of their base too much and just wants something that'll kind of take care of itself, something that's easy to fix. The Dreamscape comes with a little bit of a wider waist width. So the 147 has a 246 millimeter waist width, a little wider than your average kind of women's board in that size. So it's going to add stability. It's going to add a little bit of stiffness torsionally, and it'll give it a more stable feel. Given that it has that flat to rocker profile on it. Or if you have a bigger boot size and you want a little bit wider waist width, then it'll be good for that too. So I got the Dreamscape. I rode it in some pretty average mammoth spring conditions. A little icy in the morning, a little bit of that perfect magic hour when it's just softening up, and then it just went to straight like full-on spring slush time. The Dreamscape is a directional twin, so you can ride it switch. It feels pretty similar switch to normal, or if you're learning freestyle tricks, you know, it's definitely doable enough to take off switch or land switch. The profile of this board handles well in that softer snow. The flat section gives it a nice stable feel in between your feet, and the rocker on the nose and the tail will help the board to feel loose and feel forgiving and kind of catch free. Riding the Dreamscape flat base, it does track okay, but it does tend to be a little bit loose. So it's not locked into the snow at all. It is loose to semi-loose on the snow. The flat section does help out the stability a little bit, but it's still gonna be a little loose when you're like getting off a chair, riding one foot, or trying to ride straight and flat through like a long flat section. It might get a little squirrely in that situation. The turn initiation on this board was pretty quick. I would say it was like quick to medium quick, depending on your boot size. But because of the rocker profile, there's not a whole lot of like connection to the snow, so that it is easy to get on edge and to turn it. But because of the wider waist width, it does take a tiny bit more effort to turn, as opposed to if it had like a 232 or something, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just adds a little bit of stability there under your feet. Let's check out the flex. So I feel like this is maybe a 5 out of 10 flex. It isn't a noodly board. It has a forgiving flex, but it has a good all-mountain flex that's stable enough for all-mountain riding, but not too stiff that you can't kind of manipulate the board if you need to. As far as edge hold goes, there is no side cut disruption on this board, and it's flat to rocker. So the edge hold on ice is going to be like for that medium hard snow. It's not going to really thrive in a super icy condition. When I rode it in ice, it wasn't like terrible for a flat to rocker profile. So I feel like the stiffness of the board and that little flat section does help it out a lot, as opposed to a full rocker board. The edge hold isn't going to be quite as good as something with a little bit more positive camber in it, or something with a little bit of a side cut disruption. I took this out on like top to bottom runs. In the steeps, it was a little washy. It wasn't that performance board that you want in the steeps. I feel like this board kind of lives more in the green run to blue run environment. Would be good for learning to turn, would be good for kind of somebody who doesn't want a board that's really serious, something like a little playful, a board that you can relax a little bit and you don't have to be 100% on your game all the time. You know, it'd be a good learning board. I feel like a beginner could get on this board and it could grow with them into like that intermediate zone. But once you get into the intermediate zone, you might want something with a tiny bit more performance. So off-piste and in trees and stuff, you know, it's pretty easy to turn. It's definitely gonna turn for you in tighter spots. You get a little bit less of the stability and kind of connection to the snow. It's lacking a little bit in performance, so I feel like as long as it's mellow terrain, kind of mellow trees, not something that's steep and is gonna make you ride aggressively, but like more mellow trees, it could definitely dabble in, maybe green, blue trees, somewhere around there. It's definitely quick enough and easy enough to turn in situations like that. And in powder, you know, you get the directional profile, you get the setback, plus you can set it back a little bit extra. You don't get a ton of room, but you do get a little bit extra if you set your bindings to the furthest back inserts. And then you get the profile, which is the flat to the rocker with the wider waist width. So really this would be a decent powder board for the all mountain rider. So really this isn't a bad option if you are a beginner / intermediate and want like that one board quiver, because it will handle well in softer snow and powder. You should be able to float with minimal effort. It's not going to be great for like a super deep day. I mean, there's no taper and it's not extremely directional, but it should be able to handle in most of your average storms. As far as park goes, you know, this is forgiving enough to learn jibs and boxes on. It doesn't have a ton of pop to it, so it's not ideal for jumps, but for a beginner jump, for small features, you could definitely bring it in the park and kind of learn some freestyle on it because it is very forgiving. You're not going to have to worry about landing and catching an edge, or you could learn spins and it won't be punishing if you make a mistake. It's definitely the type of board that you could take into the park for the first time and start to learn some freestyle tricks on. So overall, the Dreamscape would be good for that beginner to low intermediate rider, someone looking for a forgiving ride, a ride that can ride powder, can ride all mountain, a snowboard that likes the blue-green terrain, isn't too serious, but also gives you a little bit of stability to it as well. Or that rider who needs a little bit of a wider waist width, maybe you ride size large bindings or have, you know, a 9 to 10 size boot, then the waist width on the Dreamscape should be able to accommodate for that. So that's a look at the Dreamscape in a 147.